Right now, a faction of Silicon Valley billionaires is actively working to dismantle democratic governments and replace them with private, for-profit corporate societies. The ideological and financial architect behind this push is Peter Thiel. He seeded the early groundwork by funding projects like the Seasteading Institute, an initiative explicitly designed to build autonomous, unregulated nations at sea. The driving philosophy here is bleak. These elites believe that automation and modern technology will inevitably render democracy obsolete. In their view, the only way to survive the coming collapse is for billionaires to carve out their own sovereign enclaves, fully detached from public oversight. This theory is already bleeding into reality. We are seeing companies like Palantir integrate deeply into federal operations, treating the government less like a sovereign authority and more like an operating system they can capture, bypass, and eventually override. Venture capitalists like Joe Lonsdale are heavily pushing what they call GovTech. Their objective is to replace democratically accountable civic functions, everything from managing public data to military surveillance, with privatized artificial intelligence and tech infrastructure. This coordinated movement bypasses public accountability to install a technocratic oligarchy, shifting the steering wheel of society from the people to a handful of private executives. To see that this is a physical, territorial reality, we only need to look at Prospera. Located on the island of Roatan in Honduras, this is an actual operational government run entirely by a for-profit corporation. Their expansion is accelerating. Recently, tech investors partnered with the Philippine government to acquire massive tracts of land near Subic Bay, aiming to build a sovereign AI-native industrial park. But the ultimate prize is domestic. The current push involves lobbying for low-regulation, low-tax prosperity zones directly on American soil, transferring federal lands into the hands of private developers. The billionaire class is buying up the state piece by piece. To understand how private capital grew powerful enough to devour the government that prints it, we have to look back at the original design of the Western economy. The current instability is the predictable result of a gamble made 500 years ago by Enlightenment philosophers. This is an 1808 coin minted by the East India Company. Trapped in a geographically cramped, highly volatile continent, European states made a radical choice to survive existential warfare. They unshackled the merchant class and weaponized private greed to fund state violence. Entities like the Dutch and British East India Companies pioneered a new system. By pooling capital into joint stock corporations, they financed private armies and navies, turning global conquest into an abstract, high-yield investment vehicle. This predatory engine delivered immense technological dominance and material wealth to the West, but it was built without a structural ceiling to cap how much power private wealth could accumulate. By designing an economic system that legally optimized and weaponized greed, the West guaranteed that a financial oligarchy would eventually grow large enough to capture the state itself. Long before the Enlightenment, ancient political architects identified this exact vulnerability. Both Plato in Greece and the Confucian scholars in China concluded that a stable society required epistocracy, the strict rule of a highly educated elite. This diagram illustrates the structural containment of human greed. To protect the state from oligarchic capture, these ancient systems engineered a permanent barrier, separating abstract wealth from political authority. The mechanism was a rigid choice forced upon every citizen. You can pursue private wealth, or you can wield public power. The paths run parallel, but they are never allowed to cross. The execution was uncompromising. In Plato's Republic, the ruling guardians were forbidden from owning private property or accumulating gold. In the Chinese imperial structure, the merchant class was legally placed at the absolute bottom of the social hierarchy to block financial capital from buying political influence. To fill those isolated leadership roles, both systems relied on decades-long, grueling educational examinations. They designed these rigorous filters to ensure that only an intellectual elite, driven by civic duty rather than a desire for profit, could manage the realm. For millennia, these civilizational models were designed specifically to suppress the exact type of unregulated, runaway merchants that now make up the modern tech billionaire class. Today, the West has run out of external frontiers to conquer. Without foreign markets to endlessly plunder, the engine of unchecked capital has predictably turned inward, financializing and hollowing out its own working population. The push for network states and privatized startup cities is the direct result of this internal hollowing. The billionaires who accelerated this societal collapse are now trying to build physical escape hatches so they don't have to live in the wreckage. When these tech leaders demand freedom from government regulation, they are demanding a mechanism to maximize their private balance sheets while abandoning the collective survival of the nation. History presents two distinct optimization targets for governance. One prioritizes the explosive outward expansion, driven by private capital. The other prioritizes long-term stability through the vetting of an insulated leadership class. As the Western model of perpetual expansion hits its physical limits, a structural leash on corporate greed becomes a matter of civilizational survival. Without that restraint, the merchant class eventually devours the state itself.